Hello, welcome to this YouTube channel. Today I will discuss on the famous speech I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King Jr. As you can see, it is in your BA English Honors Semester 3 under the particular title of American Literature, and it has been pointed as English Honors CC T5. Now, before going to the text of this particular address, let us begin with a short introduction. I Have a Dream is a public speech that was delivered by American civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963, in which he called for civil and economic rights and an end to racism in the United States. Delivered over 250,000 civil rights supporters from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., the speech was a crowning moment of the civil rights movement and among the most iconic speeches in American history. I Have a Dream is a classic example of American oratory since it celebrates a crowning moment in the civil rights struggle of the 1960s. Now, before going to further introduction of this particular text, let us know something about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was an American Baptist minister and activist who became the most visible spokesperson and leader in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. Born in Atlanta, King is best known for the advancing civil rights through nonviolence and civil disobedience. And these particular tactics, with his Christian beliefs and the nonviolent activism of Mahatma Gandhi, it actually helped inspire. King led the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott, and in 1957 he became the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that is actually pointed out as SCLC. With the SCLC, he had an unsuccessful 1962 struggle against segregation in Albany, Georgia, and helped organize the non-violent 1963 protests in Birmingham, Alabama. He also helped to organize the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered this particular speech. On October 14, 1964, King won the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality through nonviolent resistance. In 1965, he helped to organize the Selma to Montgomery marches. The following year, he and the SCLC took the movement north to Chicago to work on segregated housing. In his final years, he expanded his focus to include opposition towards poverty and the Vietnam War. He alienated many of his liberal allies with a 1967 speech titled Beyond Vietnam. J. Edgar Hoover considered him a radical and made him an object of the FBI's COINTELPRO from 1963 on. FBI agents investigated him for possible communist ties, recorded his extramarital and liaison, and reported on them to government officials, and on one occasion mailed King a threatening anonymous letter which he interpreted as an attempt to make him commit suicide. In 1968, King was planning a national occupation of Washington to be called the Poor People's Campaign when he was assassinated on April 4 in Memphis, Tennessee. His death was followed by riots in many US cities. Allegations that James Earl Ray, the man convicted of killing King, had been framed or acted in concert with government agents persisted for decades after the shooting. sentenced to 99 years in prison for King's murder, effectively a life sentence as Ray was 41 at the time of conviction. Ray served 29 years of his sentence and died from hepatitis in 1998 while in prison. King was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the Congressional Gold Medal. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was established as a holiday in numerous cities and states beginning in 1971. The holiday was enacted at the federal level by legislation signed by President Ronald Reagan in 1986. Hundreds of streets in the US have been renamed in his honor, and a country in Washington state was also rededicated for him. The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. was dedicated in 2011. Now, all these informations have been taken from internet resources and Wikipedia. Now, if you have to think about this particular text, that is, I Have a Dream, you will find that there are some important facets, there are some important references that have been taken by Martin Luther King here. Now, fundamentally, you will find that this particular dream passage or this particular address has been made long after the particular speech that is made by Abraham Lincoln, that is the Gettysburg Address. And fundamentally, the Emancipation Proclamation that have been made by Abraham Lincoln there, you will find that the same orientation has to be considered by Martin Luther King here. Fundamentally, you will find that this particular title, King says, I have a dream speech, is named for its famous repetition of the phrase, I have a dream. As I mentioned, that King delivered it on August 28, 1963, during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, in which over 250,000 people converged on the National Mall to draw public attention to inequalities that African Americans still faced as part of the broader civil rights movement. Given on the steps of Lincoln Memorial, King opens his I Have a Dream speech with a reference to the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves in Confederate states during the Civil War. King pointed out that 100 years after that address, African Americans were still not truly free. He went on to outline the need for and a vision of equality and justice across the country. And it culminated in a stirring call for freedom with the titular, I Have a Dream, including, I'm quoting, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. King wrote his I Have a Dream speech in Clarence B. Jones's house in Riverdale, New York. Jones, that was King's lawyer and advisor, was instrumental in drafting the speech, which wasn't finalized until 3:30 a.m. on the day of the event, and which didn't include the speech's most famous line, I have a dream. King incorporated material he had used in previous sermons and speeches. But once he began speaking, he decided to depart from his prepared remarks. He chose to use the phrase, I have a dream, which, while not in the original draft of the speech, he had used in previous sermons and speeches. Gospel singer Mahalia Jackson called from the crowd, tell them about the dream, Martin, tell them about the dream. From that point on, King departed from his script and improvised, giving one of the most celebrated and significant speeches in American history. The speech itself is widely praised and studied for its rhetorical power and reference in popular literature. I Have a Dream is inscribed on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, where King delivered his famous words. So what Martin Luther King actually spoken during this particular speech, we will consider them with great detail in our next lectures. So stay attached. Thank you.